I'm Quizal Marie Vitimao and I will discuss the five cases that I've chosen.
In this slide, I will only summarize the facts or the incident. So, on February 4, 1986, in Magsaysay, Davao del Sur, Eupaldo Singcol committed a violent attack against his own family. First, he argued with his father, Andres Singcol, who warned him not to harm his sister-in-law, Egmeja. In anger, Eupaldo stabbed his father in the chest with a knife, killing him instantly. Afterwards, Eupaldo encountered Egmeja, who was with her children and his mother. He tried to hack Egmeja but struck her 2-year-old son, Jonathan, slicing his abdomen. Jonathan survived only because of immediate medical treatment. Eupaldo then stabbed Egmeja in the chest, causing her death. After realizing she was dead, Eupaldo surrendered the knife to his mother and fled. He remained a fugitive for decades until he was arrested in Zamboanga in 2022 after being identified in a Facebook video. Next is the version of the defense. The defense presented two witnesses, which is Leopoldo himself and his daughter Rosalie Poyo. So, Leopoldo's testimony: he described himself as an abused child, claiming Andres was violent toward him since youth. He even doubted Andres was his real father, believing he was the child of his mother Flaviana and another man. According to Leopoldo, when Andres came to his house armed with a bolo, Andres attacked first. Leopoldo said he managed to wrestle the weapon away after Andres tripped, and in self-defense he stabbed him after realizing Andres was dead. Eupaldo asked forgiveness and in despair tried to harm himself with scissors. On Egmeja and Jonathan, Eupaldo admitted stabbing them but explained he was already out of his senses at that point, acting without clear intent. Rosalie's testimony: at 11 years old, she witnessed the argument between her father and Andres. She heard loud voices but did not see them fighting with weapons. She only saw Andres already blooded and tried to stop her father from hurting himself. And aftermath, Eupaldo fled, collapsed in a sugarcane plantation, survived for 2 weeks, and later escaped to Zamboanga with help from relatives. Next is the rolling. So, the regional trial court convicted Eupaldo Singcol of two crimes under the revised penal code, which is the parricide Article 246 for killing his father Andres, homicide Article 248 for killing his sister-in-law Emija. So, number one is the parricide. The court acknowledged Leopoldo was not the initial aggressor, however, his claim of self-defense was incomplete. Why? Because when Andres had already fallen, Leopoldo still stabbed him, that made his response unreasonable. The court treated this as a privilege, mitigating circumstances, lowering the penalty but not excusing liability. Next is the homicide. The court ruled there was no treachery. Igmeja and others already knew Leopoldo was enraged and she was facing him when stabbed, meaning she had a chance to defend herself, therefore the killing was homicide, not murder. Here is People versus Edgar Jumawan. So, before the Anti-Rape Law of 1977 Republic Act A353, rape was considered a crime against chastity and mainly believed that marriage gave husbands unlimited sexual rights over their wives. RA 8353 changed this by redefining rape as a crime against person, emphasizing bodily autonomy and a consent. The Jumawan case tested this principle in court. So, the facts of this case is Edgar Jumawan was charged with raping his wife on two occasions. His defense was that rape cannot exist within marriage because sexual intercourse is supposedly part of marital rights. He argued that the law did not intend to criminalize marital relations. The prosecution, however, presented evidence that his wife did not consent and the force and intimidation were used. And about the ruling of the Supreme Court ruled that rape can occur within marriage. The court explained that under Article 266A of the Revised Penal Code, as amended by RA 8353, rape is committed when a man has carnal knowledge of a woman through force, threat, or intimidation, regardless of marital status. The court rejected the idea of marital exemption rule. It emphasized that marriage does not give husbands ownership over their wives' bodies. Consent is always required, therefore Edgar Jumawan was convicted of two counts of rape. So next is People versus Digna Ramos. In this case, Digna Ramos was charged with grave oral defamation. The information filed before the Municipal Circuit Trial Court of Piat Santo Niño, Cagayan, alleged that she uttered insulting and offensive words against another person in public. These words were considered degrading and damaging to the victim's reputation. The trial court found her guilty and sentenced her to arresto mayor, which is imprisonment ranging from 1 month and 1 day to 6 months. Ramos appealed, arguing that her statements should not be considered grave oral defamation, or at least that the penalty was too harsh. And about the ruling of the Supreme Court affirmed her conviction. The court explained that the oral defamation is classified into two kinds: grave oral defamation, which involves serious insults that deeply affects a person's honor, and simple oral defamation, which involves lighter, less serious remarks. So, in Ramos' case, the court ruled that her words were seriously insulting and therefore amounted to grave oral defamation. However, the court also recognized mitigating circumstances such as provocation and lack of intent to cause serious harm. Because of this, the penalty was reduced to arresto menor or 30 days imprisonment. Next is People versus GR number 266706. So the facts of this case is the accused ZZZ was charged before the RTC of Dagupan City with several crimes: 3 counts of rape, 1 count of rape by sexual assault, acts of lasciviousness under RA 7610, 3 counts of child abuse under RA 7610, and violation of RA 9262, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act. The victim, a minor, consistently testified about the repeated sexual abuse. The RTC convicted ZZZ and the Court of Appeals affirmed. So, about the ruling of the Supreme Court upheld the conviction. It ruled that the victim's testimony was credible, clear, and consistent, and in rape cases, such testimony alone can sustain a conviction. The defenses of denial and alibi were weak. ZZZ was found guilty of rape, sexual assault, acts of lasciviousness, child abuse, and violation of RA 9262 with penalties imposed accordingly. So, People versus ZZZ reinforces that credible victim's testimony is enough to convict, and it highlights the strong protection given by Philippine law to minors and women against sexual violence. Next is the People versus Bokekasa. So here are the facts. So the accused Carolina Bokekasa worked as a vault custodian and sales clerk at Gemari Pawn Shop in Cebu City. Because of her position, she had access to the pawn shop's valuables. She stole cash, jewelry, and sold cards worth 400,658 and 80 centavos from the vault. The theft was discovered and she was charged in court. So the RTC convicted her of qualified theft, and the Court of Appeals affirmed the ruling. The main issue before the Supreme Court was, is Carolina Bokekasa guilty of qualified theft under Article 310 of the Revised Penal Code? The Supreme Court said yes. Theft was clearly established. She took property belonging to another without consent and with intent to gain. It was qualified theft because she committed it with grave abuse of confidence as vault custodian. She was entrusted with the pawn shop's valuables and she betrayed that trust. Since the value exceeded by 22,000, then penalty imposed was reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment. The doctrine here is that grave abuse of confidence qualifies theft into a more serious crime. When someone entrusted with property abuses the trust to steal, the law imposes a heavier penalty. This case reminds us that the betrayal of trust is treated very seriously under Criminal Law Book 2.